Asked you guys for some hot takes on Diamondback, and while we will get to those here in a bit, I just wanted to highlight these absolute gems. They're corny, funny, dumb, but also clever and genius all at once. So stupid.
Is it worth it?
What's up, nerds? You know what's coming next. Diamondback is a 3 energy, 3 power card that reads ongoing : enemy cards here afflicted with negative power have an additional -2 power. Overall impressions of Diamondback. I like it.
I like it a lot.
Honestly, there's nothing too interesting about this card. Well, that's sort of a weird way to put it. It's an interesting card, but I don't think in the text on it. I think in its applications and its potential, it's a little bit more interesting. We will get to that here in a minute, though. But as far as like overall overarching things you can say about this card, it seems solid. I think it's a little bit more versatile than people think. And I don't think you're going to have to work very hard to make it decent, which has all the makings of a solid card. But let's figure out more about why I think that in the pros and cons. All right, first thing up here, net power and value. What I mean by this is, like I said a second ago, you don't have to work very hard to make this good. And by not very hard, I mean, if you were afflicting 2 cards on the enemy's side of the board, the villains cards, then it's a 3/7, which is solid. I mean, that's above rate. There's a lot of other cards that we are playing in the metagame that just don't get that value all the time. And I think Diamondback is going to get like a minimum 7 points of power value pretty much every time. Next thing here, Luke Cage backup. So this is where I think the maybe versatility that people are sleeping on a little bit comes into play. Now, I don't mean it's a Luke Cage substitute. Obviously, if you're playing Diamondback, you're probably going to want to play Luke Cage, but usually in decks that have Luke Cage, like Hazmat, Ajax decks, or even like ongoing decks with Man-Thing and US Agent, usually those cards are kind of like a really bad double-edged sword or just outright bad for you unless you have Luke Cage. Well, what Diamondback does is it makes the affliction one-sided. If you are playing an affliction deck and you don't draw your Luke Cage, instead of being sad now, now you have the opportunity to be like, it's fine. We're gonna win the one lane Diamondback is in because it's providing a really powerful one-sided effect. Third thing here, not just for Ajax. Some people pointed out, like in the hot take section, people are pointing out to the Toxic Surfer deck that is kind of popping up a couple of months ago with like Hazmat and Odin and stuff like that. Honestly, I always thought that deck was a bit of a meme, but this does make that better. I think more likely we will see stuff like the ongoing Spectrum decks that are going around right now, but they're playing a little different. They're not really focusing on Man-Thing and US Agent. They're focusing on Captain America and Moonstone and stuff. But this thing with Moonstone is pretty sick. But yeah, I think those old school Spectrum decks with US Agent and Man-Thing and Luke Cage, I think you can kind of kick the Luke Cage now and just play Ajax because it's just better if you're only doing sort of an affliction playstyle. All right, and the fourth thing here, it's more soft control. If you're watching this, you've heard me said this before. I am a fan of things that aren't outright control cards, but moderately influence the way the opponent wants to play. And Diamondback is definitely, I think it's like peak soft control. Like Mojo, people don't want to play into a Mojo lane. Diamondback is going to provide that, but like even force the opponent to want to ignore that lane even more. All right, on to the bad here. Really, as you can see on the downsides here, I'm having a hard time really thinking of that many downsides, but the best one I could come up with is if the cards I know the card's going to be excellent in Hazmat decks, but if it starts leaking outside of that and making decks that just generally wouldn't want to run like Hazmat or Man-Thing or Luke Cage, or US Agent, if Diamondback and Man-Thing and US Agent start leaking into other decks, then it's absolutely going to cause a shift in what people use for tech cards. Right now, we're mostly seeing Red Guardian, and the other tech cards are usually like Shang or like a Rogue or something, Even I'm seeing Negasonics, and Rocket and Groot I think is kind of a tech card. Not so harsh, but it sort of is. I think if Diamondback gets popular, it's one of those cards that are going to shift the kind of tech cards people want to play, which then will kind of ruin the popularity of the card. And the second thing here, I couldn't think of anything else. So if you have any ideas on why it's maybe going to be a bit of a clunker, leave them in the comment section below. All right, let's check out some of y'all's hot takes before we get to my recommendation and an example deck list. All right, first up, we got Adam from the YouTube channel. By the way, I'm going to be asking this question on all my reviews. So if you want to chime in, let people know what you feel about a card coming up. All my reviews, look for a community post asking for your opinions and hot takes on new card releases. But this one is a good card people won't be excited about because of Luke Cage. I get it, but I kind of disagree. I think the prevalence of Luke Cage, or the uprising of Luke Cage being a counter to this card, I don't think is really the actual card you should worry about if you're worried about counters or people just sleeping on a card. I think Enchantress and like Red Guardian and Shadow King are actually way worse for Diamondback, and those are the cards I would be thinking about if I was to like shit on and be a downer about Diamondback. I would think about those before Luke Cage. All right, next up, we got Gunny T. Good dude. He says, yet another card forcing me to play Luke Cage or get my pants pulled down. I thought Chavez was changed so we could make 12 card decks again. Guess not. I totally disagree with this. If a deck that is running Hazmat, Scorpion, Cassandra Nova, Red Guardian, Man-Thing, and US Agent isn't forcing the meta to shift to Luke Cage already, I don't think one extra card's actually going to do it. And like I was saying earlier, I don't think you have to play Luke Cage to beat those types of decks. A 3/2 is just not that exciting, and if you're playing cards like Enchantress or Shadow King, or even a Rogue to steal the opponent's Luke Cages, I think those are much better answers, and I think that's where people are going to start leaning towards if this card, or just Affliction in general, becomes too prevalent. This is a hot take. We got Andrew Dole over on Twitter saying, don't bother running Luke Cage if you have her. I actually kind of touched on this earlier. I think this is a little extreme, but the idea is right. We got Grivok, absolutely legendary commenter on my channel. He says, a strong addition to the Affliction meta that currently doesn't exist. Yeah, I guess this card doesn't exist, so Grivok, you're right in that. But what? Obviously a card that released doesn't exist yet. But I guess I kind of get what he's trying to say. But I mean, Man-Thing and US Agent exist, and they're pretty similar. We got the best take so far. Worse than Thunderbolt Ross because no stash. Absolutely. I replied to this guy, yeah, every card is going to fucking suck in comparison to Thaddeus Thunderbolt Ross and that glorious mustache. You are correct, Odie. Rabble Rouser says, I think they're going to take Luke Cage out next OTA, so... No, I don't think so at all. What do you mean take Luke Cage out? I don't get this one. I'm not trying to dunk on you, but like, what do you mean take it out? Or you mean boost Luke Cage to make Diamondback and Hazmat and Man-Thing and all that stuff worse? Or you think they're just going to nerf Luke Cage again, which would make Diamondback even better? Not flying with this one. Thanks for commenting though. Love you. And finally, we got Sasha Naft saying, good Malekith pull. Yeah, it is a good Malekith pull. But I will say, I don't think those Ajax decks you're probably used to playing on the ladder right now are really going to have to play Malekith if they don't want to. Yeah, it's good with Malekith, but I think go in a different direction, which we will take a look at right now. All right, example deck list. What do you know? It's an Ajax deck. Wow. I don't want to... with example deck lists, I don't like suggesting things that are like off the wall or like fringe ideas. I just, in this section, I just want to make a deck that I think you're probably going to see a bunch going forward with this card. And here, what I was saying with the Malekith pull is kind of what I'm talking about here. Adam Warlock got changed, and I'm actually a pretty big fan of Adam Warlock. You do have to run certain cards with it to make it good. One of them being Hydra Bob or any other one drop that just gets you priority real quickly. Basically, this is the idea of the Ajax decks you see on the ladder now, but we're cutting the Zabu anti-venom Malekith stuff. Instead of getting like value with your 4-drops in Zabu, I think you can just lower your curve and get the same effect and actually get to your important cards just as well. Or rather, Diamondback doesn't make Ajax and Hazmat that important. Right now in those decks with Zabu and the 4-drops, I think you're running Malekith because if you don't pull your Hazmat, your Luke, or your US Agent or something with Malekith, or you don't hit a good trigger on Anti-Venom, they kind of flounder a little bit. They're a little weak. But with Diamondback, I think that's a good backup to Ajax. It's a good backup to Hazmat. It's a good backup to Man-Thing and US Agent. It's a good backup to Luke Cage. So I think now that we have this diverse of a card set, I don't think you need to run stuff like Malekith anymore. All right, recommendation, should you spend resources? So I will say for tokens, don't unless you have US Agent, Man-Thing, and maybe even Ajax as well. I think you're gonna need most of the Afflict cards to actually make this decent. Maybe you can get away with buying Diamondback if you have US Agent and Man-Thing and you just put this in like a Spectrum ongoing deck that leans on Affliction stuff. Maybe. I would wait though, but I think to pull the trigger for tokens on day one for Diamondback, you have to have all the other cards. Now, as far as keys go, I would say if you have Nimrod and Phoenix Force, I think it's the same scenario with the tokens. Only if yada yada yada. But if you don't have Nimrod or Phoenix Force, then yeah, I actually think it's a decent pickup. Nimrod unlocks like a whole new way of playing. If you don't have Nimrod, you can't play Nimrod style decks whatsoever without Nimrod. It's not the best, but you can't do it without that card. So that's an okay pickup. I despise Phoenix Force and Phoenix Force decks. I think they're weird, clunky, and just outright bad. And the only reason people win with them is because they have like perfect lines, which any deck would win if they have a perfect line. So my opinion on Phoenix Force is, but if you don't have it and you really want Diamondback, I guess it's okay to spend 4 keys. That's it though. That's the video. I just want to say, I can't believe I forgot to mention High Evo. But yeah, just to wrap up real quick. Ajax decks, High Evo decks, Spectrum ongoing decks, Toxic Surfer decks, maybe some new type of deck that doesn't even run like the whole full suite of Afflict cards. Maybe it's just a junk deck that runs Spider-Woman or something. I think this card's a lot more flexible than people think. But I'm talking too much now, and we're already past 8 minutes, so I got my mid-rolls. Bye.